Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web tonight. We got special guest, TheOtherPaul, famous Theo Bro debater of master quality. So he's going to be joining us. He is, gone Anglican. So we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the state of the Anglican Church as it relates over its battle on homosexuality on a global scale. So there's a lot going on in the news right now, specifically with regards to this issue. And it's pretty global for the Anglican Church. We're going to discuss and get into the nitty gritty of it. And we're also going to do a meme review as well, courtesy of the followers on the Twitter sphere. So they get to set the, you guys had the chance to submit your memes. I submitted a few just to astroturf the algorithm, and I had some memes that I wanted for this occasion to be discussed, but we got some feedback, some interesting feedback as well. So how are you doing tonight, TheOtherPaul?
I'm doing excellent. It is only just turned noon right now, and it is a fine blue cloudless sky outside, so it is going very nice and lovely right now.
Yeah, it's we've had a slow spring, but spring is definitely where I'm at, and we didn't really have a winter. So there's no snow where I lived. And I'm looking at California getting a bunch of snow. It's like we didn't get any of that. But we're latitudinally the same, Maryland is on the same latitude as Lisbon, Portugal, if that's any perspective. So maybe we just shouldn't expect that much snow ever. So
potentially.
I doubt it, but there were some years where there's like 2 feet of snow, but
yeah,
it's been
we just don't get any. We just don't get any where I am. Just none in Sydney. We'll have
paradise.
We'll have cold winters, quote unquote. But for you, that's probably like, oh, this feels like spring for me. But our summers are where you'll die. It's probably like good old James White down in Arizona. He probably knows what we feel.
Really? I got to get him on for an interview.
Oh, 100%. That'll be awesome.
That would definitely be awesome.
2 peas in a pod right there.
Yeah, I'd love to get his take on, Presup and Thomism.
Okay, that'll be a fun one.
Yeah. So it's because these classical apologists on Twitter just annoy me so much. That's the only reason. They're the worst argument for classical apologetics is the people on Twitter that are anal about it and put it above a pedestal. So one of the last times we talked, I don't know if you're Anglican yet. And I know there's a time that we had you on where you were searching for a church. You bounced around. I know you've been to Hillsong, which is, a lot to say about that. Did you participate in any honorarium schemes?
Mate, I wish I could use an honorarium.
But yeah, apparently he came to this country and got a DUI. Brian Houston did. And, unpopular opinion, just because I don't think most people have heard this argument, but DUIs are probably the biggest indicator of whether, an immigrant or illegal or otherwise is going to commit future crime.
I mean, it makes perfect sense.
And it's not even a deportable offense here in the United States. So it really should be, because that's like the number one crime. That's an indicator of future crime for that category.
And it has to be done. It's not something that's just like that you can just mistakenly do. Like, oh, whoops, I slipped on a banana peel. Now I just chugged down 2 bottles of VB or something. It's like, you gotta, the law. You got to deliberately choose to do that and to circumvent it. Like I agree with you. That's a very good indicator.
Well, yeah. And, so I'm on team deport Brian Houston if he's in the United States, but it's just interesting to see Hillsong family collapse. Since we're touching on Australia and the rest of the Anglosphere as it relates to the English language. And then one of the articles that I covered recently was one of the churches that paid an honorarium to Hillsong, which was Churcham, which is Judah Smith's church, which has quarterback Russell Wilson, or Russell Weirdo, as he's better called. He's on their board of directors. So I just think that's wild. Like, this is someone that, is a quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks at the time, probably. Now he's with the Denver Broncos and he's terrible. But he what's the way to put this? He, championed abstinence up or waiting till marriage and then Snapchat, his sex night,
Oh,
put that on
jeez. Oh.
Snapchat. So that's the type of person that
That
Russell Wilson is.
to I want to translate that for because I don't really know who that player is. I don't know how popular is he, like,
Right
generally.
now he's kind of a joke because
But
he's
like
over
in terms of NFL,
he
how popular?
like 5 years ago he was a, top 10 quarterback easily.
Okay, so
5 to
I'd
10.
probably say, to translate it for Australians and New Zealanders, one of the most well respected and best like rugby players ever is a guy called Sonny Bill Williams. Um, Imagine him being like ordained like a mufti and put on some grand Islamic council. That's the equivalent of this.
Yeah,
That's the
it's funny
equivalent
because
happening here.
that church in particular also had, heaven tourism filmmaker Devon Franklin on its board of directors and TD Jakes, who doesn't even go there as far as I know. So it seems like they have a pay system for you can pay enough money and be on the board. But and then we got some news out of Hillsong NYC, which I think Carolyn McAllister's referencing here, that Carl Lentz has announced his comeback, and he's also going to be doing a
I
public
heard,
interview
yeah.
on a Hillsong documentary for FX. Because he's going to
Oh,
slam
great.
his old boss, even though he was rightly fired by Hillsong
Yeah,
for
rightly, yeah, yeah,
cheating on
100%.
his wife, who's reasonably attractive unless she has like implants or anything, which is debatable. Just looking at one picture, but
Why, mate?
no,
Why?
the woman that he cheated on her with was like 5 steps below that. Like, dude, what
Oh,
are you
man, I
doing
mean, like,
here?
sin works in mysterious ways,
It
you know?
does. It does. Like, it's the whole Tiger Woods thing. He's very famous for his escapades, and what was it 2009 when he had the whole cheating thing on his wife, and it was with like waitresses at these restaurants and all that, and it's like now he tricked his girlfriend into leaving his house and then threw all her stuff out or something like that, so she wants to sue him. And it's like, if you're going to be a deviant, you shouldn't be a cheapskate, I think, is his issue.
Mm,
But it's wild what athletes do in this
mm,
country, and pastors as well.
yeah.
uh
To give a little brief, like, not semi insider stuff, because it's not exactly global news things, but because I know people still who like go to Hillsong, and that they actually just had their big AGM where they went through like the whole financial scandal stuff, and they basically announced like total revampings to like basically massively cap these, because everything that they did past Brian Houston, it was all very unethical, stupidly massive honorariums, massive tax-free allowances and leeways and all that, but it was all legal.
Spending
That's
on
the
luxury hotels in your own
Yeah, it
state.
was all legal. That's the big issue. So there's not going to be anything criminal or legal or whatever happening. But
Yeah.
in response to that, in the AGM, they have announced, I don't have the details with me just yet, I'll have to ask, but basically they're going to be starting introducing like massive caps on
Now,
these
I think the one
honorariums.
mitigating factor, and this is just from an American's perspective, is that those documents are probably using Australian dollar, which is not as,
Mm,
which is more inflated than the US
yeah,
dollar.
that's right.
So, people will think that, oh, $6 juice. Bobby Houston needs her
Yeah.
$6 juice. And in America, that just sounds really bad.
Yeah, put it in perspective. I have to go to if I go down to the, well, we call it the servo, that's the service station or the gas station, like just to get some snacks or whatever. If I want to get like a decent sized can of Pepsi, I want to get like a bag of Cheezels, like the chips, and they're already a bit more expensive there than they are in normal grocery stores. I want to get those two. That's going to set me back like 10 Australian dollars. So don't think American when you hear that. You're going to be like, what the heck? $10? No. It's Australian dollars. Don't worry. It may as well be the yuan at this point.
Yeah, so people need to understand that's probably the numbers, the currency they're using in Hillsong reporting. So I think Americans are hyping that up a little too much without
Mm,
realizing that
yep,
nuance. But anyway, you've since gone Anglican, so tell me
that's
about
right.
why you chose them as are they the one true faith or the one true faith in your uh, area of Christendom?
Yeah, so anyone who's not Anglican, let him be anathema. No. So I chose it. I chose it because I don't know if I the last time I was on here, I don't know if I just because I actually became Anglican, quote unquote, last May, and I think I was on you sometime after that. So I think it had
September or
already happened.
August. So okay.
Okay, yeah, so it definitely happened after. But I guess to kind of recap, I went Anglican initially, not out of anything like, I was disabused of like Pentecostal evangelical type worship and life and all that. So I wanted to find something more traditional. But I wasn't deliberately looking for like, okay, what's the best Protestant denomination with the best theology and all that stuff. I mean, that was in the back of my mind kind of far back, but it wasn't really a concern. I was cool whether I'd go Presbyterian or Anglican, or I wasn't thinking at the time, but perhaps I would have even gone Lutheran if there was a good one there. So I only went Anglican because after a long time, a little bit after the lockdown, so I hadn't been to church for like a year, and I just wanted to find a good and faithful church that's reverent, respectful of the Lord's teaching. It's not concert worship, that I can just call my home. And my initial preference was actually like a traditional Presbyterian church, but it wasn't like a super strong preference. Like, I'm super affirming of Presbyterian theology and not Anglican or Lutheran. It was just that. And it was by providence that I met someone who told me about an Anglican church that was actually very near me, and I didn't even know about it. I thought it was like a heritage building or something. So went there and thought, hey, I love here. And then only after that, I thought, okay, let's see what I've signed up for. And then that's right after that is when I did my stream where I did like a live reaction to the 39 articles, because I hadn't even studied them before. So that's how I went there. That's how I chose it initially, just out of necessity. But now afterwards, having explored the Anglican formularies, and those are like the foundational documents, the Anglican tradition. That's like the Book of Common Prayer, the 39 articles, and the 2 books of homilies. After studying them more and other Anglican sources, I've come to think, actually, no, the Anglican tradition is actually, in my opinion, the best expression of the Christian faith. So it eventually became a deliberate theological decision. So that's my story in sum.
Okay, so what exactly, I'm Baptist. I understand Presbyterianism. I understand a lot of the other, denominations in a sense. But I don't know what makes Anglicanism distinct, because I'm pretty sure you can be a Calvinist in an Anglican, you can be Wesleyan in an Anglican. So so I'm not entirely sure what makes it a unique category other than perhaps ecclesiology. But what exactly makes it theologically stand out?
Yeah, so Wesleyan and Anglican, I know Wesleyanism drew from the Anglican tradition. I'm not sure if you can fully affirm the 39 articles and be a Wesleyan. I'm not really sure of that. You definitely can't affirm the Synod of Dort, which that is more taken by the Continental Reform, but the Synod of Dort was attended by and affirmed by many of the original Anglicans, so that is actually a big influence. And for those who don't know, the Synod of Dort, that's basically where Tulip got inspired from. Tulip came much later, but that's pretty much where it came from. Very strong on the things of like the perseverance of the saints, for example, and divine election. But other things make this thing, well, yes, it's ecclesiology. It is Episcopal. So, we have bishops and all. We have three holy orders of deacons, presbyters, or priests, and bishops. Unlike the Baptists and I don't think like the Baptists just kind of have like any number of holy orders, like you got your senior pastor and your regular pastor, your associate pastor, whatever. Presbyterians, they'll have their presbyters, like teaching and ruling elders, and their deacons.
But they also have the interconnected church court system.
That's right. Yeah, they have the synod, they have the synodal system too.
What makes the Baptist or Congregationalist view, what their view is in a nutshell, is the local church is the highest ecclesiastical authority, which says a lot less about how that local church is then structured. Is an elder ruled local church, or is it a member rule? So that's a slightly separate nuance of that issue. But local church is basically that versus on up. But you guys have like a three rungs.
Yeah, 3-tier holy orders. There's a very healthy balance, and to be fair, this is probably the same even with this is the same with like Catholic churches as well. Although I don't think to the same extent, but obviously, even though it's a Episcopal system and it's synodal, so there's ruling bishops and the archbishop and all, and they have authority top down. But at the same time, there's a lot of discretionary power given to parish councils. So there is like some overlap with Congregationalist type of rule, though it's not completely Congregationalist, obviously. But I guess theologically, I would say that the Anglican tradition is fundamentally reformed, though not necessarily tulip or neo-Calvinist, if that makes sense. There's actually some more nuanced thinking of like monergistic theology back in like the earliest times of the Reformation that the Anglican tradition adopts. And what also would make it unique to the Baptists and to the Presbyterian, not necessarily always to the Presbyterians, but certainly to most Baptists, would be that in the Anglican tradition, there is a very strong sense of Christ's presence in the Lord's Supper. So not necessarily the real presence, although importantly, that is actually a permitted view from my reading. So
so I'm familiar with the Genevan view, which is
that's right,
probably the view that I would hold to.
That's right, yeah, and
then
that's
the view of the
pretty much
Anglican
my
Church?
view as well.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's the view of the Anglican Church, although it's very common to find both like the Genevan view of like the kind of spiritual ascent to heaven, and also even to an extent a Lutheran view. So that's actually tolerated in the Anglican tradition. So that would be a distinct.
Yeah, because the Lutheran view is like it's kind of a mix between. It's kind of like in between transubstantiation and the Genevan view, I guess.
I wouldn't really say in between. There's a bit. It's not really possible, I don't think, to say in between, because it works by very different categories. It very much takes for granted the categories of transubstantiation, of the distinction between the accidents and substance, but they say that the substance, unlike transubstantiation, the substance of bread and wine is not annihilated in transubstantiation. So Catholics will say the substance of bread and wine is gone, as far as I've read, but the Lutherans will say it's still there. So it's kind of like a both and situation, which is interesting, and that is permitted in the Anglican tradition. But overall, even though initially I was quite vocally and open a full on purely memorialist guy, I've since learned it's probably not possible to be a pure memorialist in the Anglican tradition. And I didn't change purely because of that, but I've genuinely come to think of like the Genevan view as like the better one. And so that really does point to the true uniqueness of Anglican theology, in that there are clear boundary markers for acceptable views in the Anglican tradition, but they're also not overly specific on what's allowed. So you can have a limited degree of diversity of views in certain issues, including on this issue. You can be a Genevan or a Lutheran view of the real presence. Like my good friend Father James, who runs the channel Barely Protestant, he, as far as I remember, he holds to a Lutheran view of the real presence. Likewise with baptismal regeneration as well, that's more or less a given in the Anglican tradition. That's very different to like Presbyterians and Baptists, although even with them, you can have diversity of views, like what exactly is entailed by baptismal regeneration and that. So yeah, those are some of the unique elements. But I'd say the most unique element is just the fact that they establish good and clear boundaries, but they don't choose to venture beyond that and enforce much more specific views than that, if that makes sense. And that's what I really love about it. It establishes what I think are the most sensible and reasonable boundary markers for views, and it chooses not to engage in further speculation for the most part. And that's what I really like about the Anglican tradition.
Yeah, I think Big Tent is, the Big Tent, the Southern Baptist Convention, tries to be a big tent. And to a large degree, they are.
Say.
You think they're too big? Okay. Well, yeah, it's like a box of chocolates. You're not sure what you're going to get. Now, I want to raise the question of where exactly does Anglicanism fall as it relates to like evangelical versus mainline? Because I feel like the answer to this question changes depending on where you are in the globe. Like in the United States, I think they had to make like a separate Anglican. Didn't they have to make a separate Anglican
ACNA,
denomination? Yep. Yeah, ACNA, which is where Ravi Zacharias was. But
oh wow, there you go.
Yeah,
well, apparently he was. Apparently, he was pretty lousy with his church life and all that, which makes perfect sense.
It's pretty notorious. But
yeah,
I'm just trying to put a name to a thing. But
yeah, that's it. Yeah, I actually didn't know that he was ACNA. There you go.
Yeah.
Sure he wasn't Episcopalian? I
don't know. But yes, speaking of, we started off with talking about football quarterbacks with Russell Wilson. What Ravi Zacharias was your Deshaun Watson, who was getting he was getting, same thing, all about the happy endings at the massage parlors. So
yeah.
Except,
Jeez, yep.
Yeah, it's just you if you're in ministry, don't buy a massage parlor. That's just extremely shady. But
yeah, 100%.
so
Actually, one second. I'm gonna take out my Bluetooth earphones. They're a bit wonky at the moment.
So
yep.
The question I have is, since in America there seems to be different contexts for Anglicanism, whether it really fits into, you're just Episcopalians that sound older, or are you, evangelical in your theology, which would largely have to do with, your adherence to things like the Chicago Statement on Inerrancy and stuff like, the issues of the past of the last generation as relates to modernism in the church. I think, and obviously the issues now as it relates to social justice and its various three-pronged attack on the church that we're seeing today.
Yeah.
So how is it in Australia?
So for Australia, definitely a mixed bag, but I'd say that it's odd because, like, if you take Anglicanism in its original traditional form and even its official form through the formularies, it is very much on the main line on lowercase c Catholic side. So very liturgical, very traditional in many respects, whilst also submitting such ideas to the ultimate standard of Holy Scripture, which is what's most important. But then in practice, including in Australia and really most Western places where the Anglican Church is, as far as I'm aware, it's very, very evangelical in practice, which isn't always a bad thing. It's often a very good thing because there is a huge emphasis on the gospel. My own church, they do have a traditional service, albeit it's very stripped down. But then their other services are like pretty contemporary, but they're not concert, which is good. So I can tolerate it, and it's actually good in a sense. But otherwise, their emphasis is heavy on the gospel preaching and all that, which is good. Although I think it should be supplemented with more stuff of appreciation of the Anglican tradition as it is. But nonetheless, it's good and very solid and very evangelical in that respect. Unfortunately, there are a number of places
liturgical light.
Yeah, there are liturgical. There is the presence of liturgical light. I'm actually in a small group of traditionally minded Anglican friends here in Sydney. We actually want to start something where we can attract people to the traditional thought of the Anglican Church and hopefully start something in cooperation with our archdiocese in order to inspire more desire and participation in like traditional Anglican liturgies, including the good old 1662 Book of Common Prayer. But otherwise, very much evangelical, and in a number of cases, unfortunately, definitely too evangelical. Like there is another Anglican church very close to me, closer than my actual one. But when I went there for the first time, I would not have known it was an Anglican church if not for the name. Like that's it. It was an Anglican church. It had Anglican in the name and on the website, but everything, how they did things, how they practiced, how they presented themselves on their website, the website aesthetics, everything screamed like an independent evangelical, even Pentecostal church. It just screamed that. And so that's something I think is unfortunate. Not that, oh, how dare you, you're putting your relationship with the Lord in danger. No, not that. Although I do think non-liturgical worship can have that danger, and that's why I'm not a fan of it. But the issue is that, look, you guys are claiming to be Anglican, but there's like nothing on your Anglican identity in this church. So like, what's up? Why do you guys even call yourself Anglican? So yeah, that's very common here. It's less than to be desired, but that's kind of how it is.
Alrighty. So, as it relates to the King of England, what exactly is the King of England's relationship with the Anglican Church historically versus practically? And do you think that's a weakness in the ecclesiology?
Yeah, with especially the current King of England,
I
most
don't
definitely.
think
He's like
I don't think Queen Elizabeth was all that.
Yeah, that's it. Even
She
though
wasn't based either.
Even from what I've seen, even though she was like a pious, believing Anglican, like her role as the head of the church, like she did literally nothing. So, I mean, what gives? Yeah, I think as much as that is pretty much at the foundation of the Church of England, I think that has posed many big issues, and now we're seeing the fruits of it. Now we basically have a heathen king, functionally speaking. And I'm even hearing stuff. I haven't confirmed it. I'm even hearing stuff of how they're going to change like the coronation oath to include like defender of faiths plural or something like that.
I thought this
Which
would have
is
already happened.
it didn't happen with the Queen, that's for sure, because she was
No,
ordained.
I thought that he was already coronated. Like, you
Oh no,
just
so I'm thinking of like the King of England when he I
yeah, I
think the
remember the
coronation
story.
ceremony, he became the king like as soon as she died, but the coronation ceremony, has that happened yet? I don't know. I'm like I haven't checked
Yeah,
it.
he's not on my money, so I don't know.
That's just how little I care. That's just how little like I care about it. I don't even know if it's happening or not. But yeah, the relationship with the King of England, I mean, like it's demonstrating the fault lines of that relationship, and functionally with the Church of England itself, where that relationship is centered. Now that they've gone apostate, we've basically disestablished ourselves. Like so do you know GAFCON, the Global Anglican Futures Conference? Much?
I want to learn more about that, but I
Have
am
you heard
aware
of
that there's
them?
vaguely.
Yeah, so they're basically a big global traditional Anglican organization. They try to be a rallying point for traditionally minded Anglicans against the forward advance of homosexuality in the church. So there's them, and then there's also a sort of informal union called the Global South, which is very closely tied with GAFCON. And the Global South basically includes Anglican Communion dioceses outside of like the Western world. So like Africa, Asia, and
Uganda forever.
Sorry,
Uganda forever.
I've got it forever, bro. Honestly, my mate even jokes. Oh, thank you. Other Phillips says it happens on May 6th. Yeah, I thought it hadn't happened yet. But my mate actually joked that like, hey,
I'm
if like the church,
American.
if the King of England, Church of England's gone bad, the King of England's like basically apostate. What if we lobby the King of Nigeria to become the new head of the Anglican Church? That would be amazing. I don't think they even have a king, but that'd just be hilarious. But yeah, so functionally, so the Global South, they comprise the majority of the Anglican Union as well, and they're very traditional because they're not Westerners, they're not infected by the liberal mindset, and so as soon, literally one day, this speaks to the efficiency, like great efficiency that we can have. One day after the Church of England announced that they're going to start blessing same-sex relationships, that was on February 9th. February 10th, GAFCON and the Global South, literally the majority of the Anglican communion worldwide, announced that they're cutting off the recognition of the Church of England's spiritual leadership over the communion. Like, done. One day. That's it. And so the majority of the Anglican world, the traditionally minded ones, we have functionally disestablished ourselves, like functionally, because the King of England, his relationship with the Anglican communion is through the Church of England. We've basically already disestablished ourselves. And so now the only question really remaining is how long until the Church of England itself is disestablished. And I think that's just accelerated like times 12 speed.
Now, this is a fundamental issue that went back to the founding of the United States, as well as the colonists fleeing the Church of England and its influence. So having like a monarch be head of the church, I think is not good, not a good idea
I agree.
at all. And that was part of the reason of the founding of the country. And then you have a lot more emphasis on the other denominations, mainly Presbyterian and Congregationalist denominations really took off in the United States for that reason. But it's interesting that you mentioned that things have actually gotten better in that regard because there's enough of an overseas establishment and of an Anglican sphere that they can essentially leverage that against the Church of England. And they've basically turned the Church of England into a figurehead of the Anglosphere. And now you're saying that this global conference has disavowed that figurehead or
Pretty
disestablished.
much the majority. So it's not like GAFCON and the Global South. They represent like the official global body or whatever. Because technically, if you want to have, and those are the dates I just posted for anyone who's interested. Um, any kind of official conference would be something like the Lambeth Conference, which is where like representatives across the Anglican world, they meet at Lambeth Palace in Britain, and they do these kinds of global actions. But functionally, GAFCON and the Global South do represent a very big majority of the Anglican world. And so for them to have cut ties was, in a functional sense, maybe not de jure, but de facto, that was a severing of the greater healthy part of the Anglican communion from the Church of England. And so the Church of England, their communion remains with like whatever other
Canada.
liberal, like, yeah, like liberal, either liberal, like vestigial liberal husks, like the Episcopal Church or Canada, or perhaps any other conservative traditional churches that just don't have the backbone to cut off ties yet. Although I don't know of those myself. So yeah, that's happened, and I'd say that in terms of ecclesial politics, this was the biggest event in Anglican history since its establishment. So yeah, can't really be understated. Yeah.
So yeah, that can't. Yeah, I feel like it's been very understated leading
Yeah,
up to this
because
point.
I mean, most people aren't Anglicans, and even many Anglicans just don't care or don't know. But it should be appreciated, and it's simultaneously a sad thing, as it's the Church of England. This is where it all started. They had a very beautiful tradition. It's where we got our prayer books, where we got our formularies. But at the same time, it's a very good thing. It shows that we had leaders with backbone who are willing to say, "No, you're a heathen. Get out. Leave. See you later."
So
Good old Calvin Robinson. Let's go. Love him.
yeah,
Love him.
so this is the clip that kind of went viral around the world on this issue within the Church of the Anglican Church. It was Reverend Calvin Robinson, who has a very nice hairdo, gotta
Very
say.
aesthetic.
And here's his speech.
Well, we are up against the authorities. 3 bishops from the established church. That means either I am wrong, and Christians have been teaching incorrectly for the last 2,000 years, and Jews and Christians for the last 4,000 to 6,000 years, or we have church leaders attempting to drag the church into apostasy. Neither way is good. The consequences are severe. This debate is not just happening in this chamber. This debate is happening in real time in the House of Bishops as we speak. There's a growing number of vocal bishops who want to change the church's teaching on marriage. The result being the spiritual neglect of Anglicans up and down this country. Now, I may have trained at the last remaining sound Anglican seminary up the road at St. Stephen's House, but I am a newbie deacon. So perhaps I am wrong on this. Let's consult people wiser than myself, starting with the church fathers.
Based.
St. Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, quite clearly identifies matrimony as being between one man and one woman, beneficial for begetting of children, and for the good of offspring for both educational and developmental purposes, necessary for the perfection of the community and for the worship of God. St. Paul describes marriage as, therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh, in which he is mirroring the language of Genesis, where God tells man and woman to be fruitful and multiply. Both Aquinas and Paul refer to matrimony as a sacrament, a holy mystery in which one man and one woman are joined together in conjugal union with the potential to be blessed by the grace of God with children, to start a family for the worship of God. People will often argue in this debate, we know more about homosexuality now than we did then. Maybe so. But are we really going to suggest that God knew less then than we know now? For either all of Scripture is God-breathed, or it isn't. Either we believe Christ, or we don't. So let's refer to another source, the Book of Common Prayer, one of the Anglican formularies, an authority of liturgy and catechism in the Anglican Church. The prayer book lists 3 ordained reasons for matrimony. First, it was ordained for the procreation of children, to be brought up in the fear and nature of the Lord, and to praise his holy name. Second, it was ordained for a remedy against sin, and to avoid fornication, that such persons as have not the gift of constancy might marry and keep themselves undefiled members of the church's body. And thirdly, it was ordained for the mutual society, help and comfort, that one ought to have the other, both in prosperity and adversity.
I just want to pause there because I don't believe that reason 2 is reason 2. You could make an argument you can make an argument that it's a reason 3, but
it might
marriage
have
is established in Genesis 2.
Yeah, it might have just been written in, like, I don't know, no particular order. But yeah, I'd agree. If you're going to put it in order, that'd be like reason 3 probably.
3 or 4. behind, the idea that marriage points to the gospel, and, the idea of Christ and the church. So that would, easily, that would probably be, 1 or 2. So so the reason he gave as number 2 would probably be 4. But yeah. Certainly in 1 Corinthians 7.
If we look wider abroad,
really quickly, sorry if you could pause for a second, to quickly address, so Carolyn asks, is he staying in his church after they go heretical? He's actually not in the official Church of England. He's actually part of a breakaway group called the Free Church of England, who basically split. I don't know if it was just because of this issue. They've existed before, but I think they've seen other issues. I think women's ordination was another one. I know very little about the Free Church of England, but they've existed for a while, and he's part of them. So he's not part of the official Church of England, but he's taking place nonetheless. So that's why. So he's not going anywhere.
All right.
The Church Catholic, which defines in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, matrimony, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole life, is by the nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized persons has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament. This is referred to as marriage in God's plan. So are we looking to alter the catechism of just the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church too? Should they all get with the times? 2,000 years of Christian doctrine cannot be altered at the whim of a few liberal bishops. What is God ordained cannot be adjusted to suit our new liberal progressive views. Marriage is heterosexual and monogamous and should be open to the possibility of children. The Bible backs all of this up. It's very clear throughout on this matter, whether it's 9 verses or 32,000 verses. Marriage is between one man and one woman for the purposes of procreation. Sex outside of marriage is a sin, and that is the same for heterosexuals as it is for homosexuals, although the Bible is quite clear that same-sex relations are abhorrent. And before some smart aleck starts asking me the question of whether I'm wearing mixed fabrics, there is a difference between the moral laws and ceremonial laws. And Christ did come to fulfill the old laws. Both the issues of marriage and homosexuality, however, are still addressed in the New Testament, in Paul's epistles, but also in the Gospels. Jesus does talk of marriage in Mark and Matthew, both in the context of heterosexual union. So my question to the bishops would be, do we not believe in the authority of scriptures anymore? Can we pick and choose which parts of the gospel we adhere to? The church, after all, is Christ's bride, as we heard earlier. Jesus is described as the bridegroom, so that we may know how he relates to us. 2 grooms would be pointless. Christ is already in union with the Father and the Holy Spirit. It's us he's inviting in. 2 brides is what we're looking at here. The church is attempting to marry itself and to leave Christ out of the picture. We are directly talking about undermining God's plan as he has revealed it to us. We're replacing his authority with our own. If marriage is no longer between one man and one woman, are we open to the idea of polygamy?
So I want to pause right there, because what he talked about with the, you're trying to, the bride is trying to have a second bride and submit to that other bride, or not even submit at all, rather than submit to the groom, which is Jesus. I thought that was a very, very well good point for why this doesn't even work, because you're just upending the biggest metaphor in probably the Bible, which is marriage, pointing to the gospel. Right, yeah. And I do want to highlight some context here in the States. I don't know if you're familiar with that Gospel Coalition article written by Josh Butler, which is which is the one article
I've got a tab open, the archive.org link. Still got it.
The internet remembers. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
But, he tried to talk about the consummation of language in Scripture, which is definitely in Ephesians 5. You can't deny that. And then they tried to go after John MacArthur for saying that. And I'm like, Paul went way further than John MacArthur did. Ephesians 5 is a very consummation language. But, if you make that argument here in the United States, you're going to get a bunch of Theo Karens all up in, panties in a twist if you try using consummation language to describe marriage. And that is what he's doing. But that's, again, it's in the Bible. And that's not why that article was bad by the Gospel Coalition.
Hmm.
It was just extremely thirsty, because that's how his book begins. Like, that's not how you preface this. You preface it based off of, probably Song of Solomon or, historic Protestant thought, but you don't go straight into your college ex-girlfriend or whatever. And that to make an argument that semen is a spiritual offering. So I just had to digress there.
Yeah.
We disregard the heterosexual aspect, so why not the monogamous aspect too? If love is love, as we keep hearing, who's to say that 3 men loving each other is not more love than 2 men loving each other? Shame, degeneracy. And I'm sure someone in this chamber has echoed the words love is love tonight, and this is not about love being love. This is about marriage, the sacrament of holy matrimony. It is directly connected to love, but it's not the definition of love. Too many people utter those words and confuse the meaning of love. Agape, the biblical context of love, is a divine love. It's a sacrificial love. It's not lustful. People often conflate sex with love. It's very disingenuous. We've heard quite a bit of that. But then, of course, atheists often parrot the words, God is love, and we've heard that one tonight too, again, without any understanding. Yes, God is love, but he sets the terms, not us. Another one we've heard plenty of is inclusivity. Should the church be more inclusive? Again, it's a play of words. It's virtue signaling. It's to appear good rather than to be good. The church should absolutely be inclusive. Christ spent time with tax collectors and prostitutes, but it is they who went away changed, not Christ. We are fallen, therefore we are all sinners. The church is open to sinners, of course it is. That's the purpose of the church. But it should not be to encourage people to continue to sin. Our duty as clerics is to help lead people to Christ, to lead them away from sin, not to embrace it, not to affirm it. I know many LGBT people who live lives in Christ. They abstain from sexual gratification to be closer to God, and it's not easy. It really isn't. It's perhaps not fair, but it is right and it is good. And these people are being let down. I've had people crying, saying, I could have got married, but I did what the church taught me was right, and now the church is saying they were wrong all along. I've wasted my life. As Christians,
I want to pause right there because he said something that was theologically incorrect in my view. This goes back to the debate surrounding concupiscence and side B theology, and he kind of dipped his toes into side B theology by identifying people with their sin. And
I think that was just a case of like him speaking their language, like rather than get into the weeds of whether to call them LGB or just people and don't identify that. I think he's just speaking their language. So
yeah,
I think
he's using common vernacular.
Context, I think that's fine. But otherwise, normally no, don't do that. But I think in this kind of debate context, I think it's just skipping past an unnecessary controversy.
I see what you're saying. It's a little bit different than what Doug Wilson did, 10 years ago on this issue at a college debate. But yes,
called to be in the world but not of the world. The trap that we're falling into in this debate is looking at the church through the eyes of the world rather than through his kingdom. In the secular world, we already have equality in law. People can enter civil partnerships or even gay marriage outside of the church, and that's their prerogative. However, the faith is inherently discriminatory. God is discriminatory. He sets conditions on us entering his heavenly kingdom. It is not a free-for-all. We must turn away from sin, repent, and follow Christ. And I want to specify, it is the sin that is the problem, not the sinner. Every single person is loved by God, and God forgives all of us of our depravity. But we have to turn away from our sins and turn toward him. And it seems the panel opposite me has forgotten to separate the sin from the sinner. One can denounce sin while still welcoming the sinner. So as I wrap up, my message to the proposing side is do not lead us astray. Do not lead people astray. Do not be the wolves in sheep's clothing. Do not be the false teachers that the Bible warns us about. Remember your obligation to defend the faith. Stop teaching about diversity, inclusion, and equality and get back to teaching about redemption and salvation. This is spiritual neglect. Help people by telling them the truth. Be kind to people by supporting them through those struggles and reminding them that Christ suffers with them. And be compassionate by leading them to Christ when the world tries to lead them away from him. The church is imploding, and the faithful masses have stopped turning up on Sundays, and we are seeing the most rapid decline of Christianity in this country that we may have ever seen. Do not accelerate it with heresy. You do not have the authority to bless sin. When I hear the Bishop of London on record saying these new prayers will mean priests can bless same-sex relationships, some of which may be sexual in nature, I hear the devil at work. Bishops are promoting the idea of sacramental sodomy. Let them be anathema. Repent.
Based.
And to the rest of you, I have no doubt that some of you will consider me a bigot or a transphobe or a homophobe, but I am neither of those things, none of those things. I am simply a follower of Christ, a Christian. And we are naturally countercultural. And if so-called liberals were truly diverse and tolerant, they would embrace us just as they embrace everyone else. And not right now, I'm just wrapping up. And the point has been made, but the growing Christophobic attitude around this public debate and the ugly level of hypocrisy is that we really see people hold Muslims and people of other faiths to the same expectations that they hold Christians to. Who is calling, except my good friend here, for Islam to embrace gay marriage? Who is calling for the Quran to be updated to modern societal norms? It is the same, mind your language, it is the same patronizing attitude of people that treat other faiths, patronize other faiths while being intolerant towards Christians at the same time. It's a shame, but in the words of St. Athanasius of Alexandria, if the world is against the truth, then I am against the world. Thank you very much.
And what he's just said there kind of answered his own question. There's a reason why no one's trying to bring gay marriage into Islam. It's because why would Satan want to subvert false movements?
Mm-hmm. Well, even more than that, they know that there's a lot of Muslims with a backbone because they're from my background. I'm half Lebanese, right? They're not going to take this crap lying down. They're not just going to let some guy come in. Hey guys, I think we should expand and become more inclusive and tolerant of LGB and express inclusivity for the LGB marriage. And they'll be like, "What are you saying, you degenerate? Get out, get out!" And then they'll just start picking up the stones from the side of the street, and the person will be running out the door of the mosque. Well, that's not going to happen.
In our defense, we've had over 100 years of feminism just grinding away at our society. Is the Islamic world hasn't experienced that yet?
Yeah, not yet. No. God willing, well, I say God willing it won't, not because I want Islam to be protected, but because, like, in a sense, this is a greater threat. And so, in a sense, the Islamic world is like it's kind of like a temporary ceasefire armistice kind of movement where, like, hey, you guys still need to repent, believe the gospel, move away from your false prophet. But in this temporary crisis, we can lay down our arms, kind of half lay down our arms. We're not going to stop preaching the gospel to you, but we can lay down our other arms and, in a way, join forces with you to push back
as co-belligerents, not allies, but co-belligerents.
Yes, exactly, not allies. The other Philip, Paul, in your example, that person will be pushed off a roof. Exactly. No, exactly. Yeah, that would happen in many places. Probably not Lebanon today. Definitely not Lebanon today, actually. Other places though, like Palestine, I believe, probably.
I thought Islam has kind of like a Greco-Roman view of homosexuality, but it's not necessarily tolerated, but kind of undergirding, if that makes sense.
In what sense?
Like they still have it, but it's like on boys and not pride parades, but
not I don't officially. I don't think I get what you're saying, like a pedophilic kind of thing. Although they don't frame it as like homo is okay,
right?
There is. I've heard a little bit about like older men on younger boys in like really old Islamic, even with Muhammad. I've heard. I can't confirm it though. I haven't read it personally. And perhaps even in modern cultures, although it's definitely not framed as like, oh, this is my sexual orientation. That's okay.
It's not framed as the movie Bros, which flopped.
Exactly, yeah, and even you can even see in certain, it's not just Muslim, but widely speaking, certain Arabic and African societies, you will see in public two men holding hands because they're best mates, not because they're romantic. Like that's just the thing. They just understand it's because they're friends. Like do that in the West today, and people say, "I'm so proud of you for coming out." Do that in Africa, and they're like, "What are you saying about you call me gay?" No, that's not going to happen.
So, and yeah, I want to point to the nation of Uganda for a second, because last week in one of the videos I did exclusively on Rumble, talked about Uganda criminalizing the self-identification of homosexuality or transgender, transvestite, or any category that was opposed to biological gender and gender roles. So non-binary would also be included in that. And then they also created a crime called aggravated homosexuality, which is basically the understanding of second-degree rape applied to this issue, which I thought was pretty base, but CNN didn't.
Of course.
But,
and even they managed to exaggerate it as to like, oh, homosexuality gets the death penalty. It's like, no, it wasn't that. It was, I think, homosexual rape, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Well, second-degree rape in our understanding of it, which is like on a child or special needs.
Yeah. And what was the punishment for identification of homosexuality?
I don't quite recall, but it was criminalized. But when you think about, what is the demographic breakdown of Uganda? It's about 13 to 14% Muslim. Right. And then afterwards, it's like Catholic and Anglican, and then other Protestant, which might also be 13%. But that's what Christian nationalism, looks like in the Ugandan context. And the Anglican Church played a role in that, probably more so than the Catholic Church, maybe.
Potentially. Yeah, potentially.
Oh, I gotta point out a shout out because Berean Babes, who I did a recent live stream with, where we debated the merits of polygamy and what would you do if someone who was in a polygamous marriage converted to Christianity. What would you do with that situation? So I think that Calvin Robinson has a different view than myself. Because I don't think that you counsel divorce in that situation, but
I might lean that way as well, because I don't think it's possible to say that polygamy is inherently sinful. You could say that certain contexts render it sinful if it's the right context. And that ultimately it's still undesirable and should not be pursued because of the creation ideal.
Right.
But ultimately you can't say it's inherently sinful. So I'd probably say the same thing. Maybe. Yeah.
So we had a fun debate about that, and you should check it out on her channel.
I will.
So it was pretty informal, but you could see that debate had the bells ringing as like a time indication, I guess. And I what I specifically loved about that speech was, he said, "Don't be false teachers, don't be heretics." Is like the way he did that. And then, by the way, a Utah Solid Church is going through that, like the
Utah.
Now, Mormonism has gone liberal. Like, people don't realize that the Mormon Church is now gay. Like, you wouldn't have thought that would happen because Mormons are so nice and they have excellent small groups and stuff like that. But they went gay, and it's basically Mitt Romney's church now. And if you're familiar with who that is,
Mitt Romney,
yeah, okay. I wasn't, it was an American reference, but with that said, like, they condemned like this protest in Idaho where they tried to sabotage a drag queen story hour. The Mormon Church condemned it, despite the fact that there were purportedly Mormons there. So, very interesting direction that they've gone. But what we have seen with, the Anglicans, and this would also mirror what's going on in the Methodist Church, is that the African coalition or whatever, that block has remained incredibly Orthodox. The Global South has remained incredibly Orthodox. I'm not sure where Australia fits in with the Global South part, but
mixed bag. So I guess to kind of draw it back to the Anglicanism issue, So Australia is not part of the global south because like we're a Western country. But it's odd. On one hand, we're not experiencing the same scale of progressive corruption as other places like the United States, but it is here. And it did have a big advance recently. I think I was actually on here when I talked about the General Synod of the Anglican Church of Australia. I think I talked about it here, yeah. And to briefly recap, they refused to affirm, like my own Archbishop Kanishka Raphael. He proposed a statement just explicitly reaffirming traditional marriage or just actual marriage, not same-sex mirage, as Pastor Wilson says. And it shouldn't have needed to be done. Like the fact that it needed to be done just shows how like lobotomized much of the synod has been. He proposed it and it passed with a healthy majority in both the House of Laity, the House of Clergy, but in the House of Bishops, it failed by like 1 or 2 votes just. And so it wasn't passed because of that reason, because of a couple of slightly higher majority of apostate bishops versus faithful.
Now, I got a quick question. Yeah. How do you get on the House of Laity?
I think you pretty much just have to be a layman who's appointed as like a representative by your church. I think that's pretty much how that happens. I don't think it's just like any Anglican just rock up and vote. You have to be like appointed, I believe. I'd like to join that one day.
But I was going to ask, like, any plans to become what?
I'd love to.
It seems like you'd be in your lane.
My plan is to pursue priesthood, Anglican priesthood. I don't think I'll go full bishop. I think I think I'd probably just want to stick to just have my parish and feed that flock and just stick there. I don't think I have ambitions for the bishopric, but who knows?
I mean, you're very well read, and I think you'd be a good teacher. So,
yeah,
but if all that fails, you can be Evangelical dark web's Australian correspondent and
Anglican dark web,
Anglican correspondent.
Can I be like the Anglican branch, Anglican dark web? But yeah, so the liberalization problem, what happened after that statement came out, and this is, I guess, kind of some updates since our discussion. I don't know if it all happened yet. But since then, after the thing was struck down, after General Synod, a few dioceses in Australia took that as license to then announce that they're going to start blessing same-sex relationships. So that started. That includes Brisbane and a couple other places. And our own church has condemned that, of course. But the best thing is that our own traditional, actual faithful Anglican branches, unlike so much of conservative ink, like particularly in the United States, like one of its defining qualities is how lackadaisical and just without action it is. But we are not that way. The Anglican Church in Australia, even the faithful Anglican communion worldwide, we are not that way, at least not on this issue. There's other ones I can get to later, though. And when that happened, that's when shortly after there was the GAFCON conference in Canberra, in our country's capital, and so with that, in that meeting, they announced the establishment of a new Australia-wide diocese, the Diocese of the Southern Cross, and that was basically going to be a pan-Australia diocese specifically made for any faithful congregations who are under apostate bishops who have started to bless same-sex relationships. They can choose to leave their bishopric and come under the Diocese of the Southern Cross, and a few churches have already joined. And those apostate dioceses have lost enough members to the point where I think in some cases they've had to combine churches. And so it's effective, it's real, it's working. And that's on top of something that my own Sydney Archdiocese, what we've been doing for a while. There has been this issue of liberalism and apostasy for a while, even before it hit the technical official level. And so we have actually sponsored like church plants in other dioceses across Australia where there were these issues. That's been going on for years. And so those things combined, even though Anglicanism as a whole is not doing so great, the liberals are like collapsing in numbers, and that's happening, and that's really good. So there is a liberalism.
I feel like events like this are a huge wake-up call. Like, I'm going to point to the Methodist Church, the UMC, and just how liberal they were and have been for several decades at this point. I mean, really, they were the first denomination to ordain women, I think. So, they've kind of always been liberal. But when they announced their divorce settlement at the UMC event or whatever, the number of churches that have voted to leave the UMC and apparently have to file a lawsuit in order to do so in some cases is just huge. And I feel like there are entire states where majority of the Methodist churches left the UMC. And it sounds like you're describing a similar phenomenon in Australia because they created this pan-diocese to allow an escape hatch under the ecclesiology of the Anglican Church.
Yeah.
And makes you think, in a different century in Christendom, this would have been impossible. But I think the Anglican Church, it sounds like, has progressed enough or expanded enough to allow this to happen. But can you explain how they were able to create a diocese? Like, how does that work?
I think it was literally just the brute force power of how many official dioceses just came together in a meeting and they chose to make this thing happen. Because Anglican ecclesiology, to ordain a bishop, you need, it needs to be 3 bishops present in order to do that. And I think it was definitely extraordinary. Certainly not something as far as I'm aware that's established in like our canon law or prayer book or anything, but it was an extraordinary situation that has been made possible by the fact that there have been many dioceses who came together and agreed to make this happen. And so they agreed to establish this legal entity of the
so there's a bit of precedent. There's a bit of precedent, like historical precedent for this.
I'm not sure.
And then they just applied it and pushed it through.
I'm not sure. I think it was just a case of brute force of the power of these many dioceses. They just came together and decided we're going to make this, and it is a legal entity as well, like all other dioceses are. And then once they've made that, they were able to then use the proper procedure for ordination, have 3 bishops lay on hands and ordain another person a bishop over this diocese. And sure enough, this is actually starting since the Church of England itself has actually gone this way. This is actually, I'm not sure to what scale, but this has actually started to happen in Britain itself. The ACNA, the head of the ACNA, Archbishop or Bishop, I think Archbishop Foley Beach, who he's unfortunately a bit loosey-goosey on the women's ordination issue, which I don't like, because the ACNA does have that problem, sadly. But he went to Wales and straight up ordained a new guy over Wales because of this issue. And the official quote unquote Bishop of Wales has kicked up a stink over it because he just went in, ordained a new guy over Wales, left, and he put him specifically under the there's kind of like a Britain and Europe organization related to GAFCON that's kind of acting like the Diocese of the Southern Cross, I think, kind of. And he ordained a new bishop under them in Wales. And they're basically going to try and do the same thing, just steal their faithful parishioners away.
That's a very interesting tactic, because one of my upcoming projects is a book called Winning Not Winsome, 10 Commandments for Spiritual Warfare, which doesn't talk about the, Anglican ecclesiology and how to really fight for that issue. It doesn't really focus on any specific ecclesiology. It mostly focuses on what laymen can do. And it talks about, vetting pastoral candidates and vetting churches for you to go to. That's more of what it focuses on, rather than interdenominational power or intradenominational power plays. But that's very interesting, especially as, I cover as a lot of denominations, just to give a quick update on what's going on. We got the Evangelical Free Church, which is a Swedish immigrant denomination in the United States. They'll be battling over whether to defrock a pastor who's anti-woke in their midst. The PCA had a landmark ruling against the Presbyterian Church. Their presbytery had a landmark ruling against the Me Too movement. And then Southern Baptists are like lawsuit everywhere. And then, but they're going to have a showdown at the annual Southern Baptist Convention over the issue of egalitarianism and Rick Warren. So there's, things are on fire right now, all over the world in the church. And it seems like we might actually be, turning the tables, even if it means using lawsuits or whatever.
Yeah.
But because they're not, and the most recent news was the guy that they tried to vindicate, that sorry, but the guy that they tried to oust in the Southern Baptist Convention was a guy named Page Patterson, who helped save the convention in the early 80s in the conservative resurgence. He was basically ousted from being the president of a seminary because he doesn't counsel divorce. And I don't even need to explain the context. You know, the Bible doesn't ever counsel divorce, and neither did he, regardless of context. And then, you know, he was accused of mishandling a sex abuse case, but he just won a summary judgment on the negligence that he was sued for. Like, the person sued him for negligence and lost in a summary judgment. Didn't even make it to a trial.
Wow.
Because the case was that weak. And the facts weren't on his side, because this adult woman reports a rape to a seminary president. He calls the police when she didn't. He actually did the right thing. He did his job.
Wow.
And then she didn't pursue charges. And then she's suing him in part because he didn't believe her enough. He didn't believe her hard enough. So and then the guy who's alleged to have done this is deceased. I don't know why, but he's deceased. So we don't get to hear his side of the story at all.
Yeah.
So, but you know, that's just a quick recap on what's going on. I already mentioned the UMC just in a massive divorce settlement that's getting ugly. So it's quite a time to be alive and covering the church. And it's good to hear that the Anglican Church is, you know, they're organizing, and the Diocese of the Southern Cross is just a genius move. And I love the name as well. It incorporates the Southern Cross is on the Australian flag, right? Or is it the New Zealand flag?
I've heard someone say it was Australasian. I'm not sure about that. I just know that it's over all of Australia.
Well, I meant the flag, like the Australian flag.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant the side Diocese of the Southern Cross. Yeah, the Australian flag, that's the Southern Cross constellation.
Okay, I wasn't sure whether they had it or New Zealand had it.
I think New Zealand also has it. I think it's just red instead of white stars.
Oh, okay. So, you know, they have good potential for a logo there. And then, but yeah, that's pretty good news. And you said that Calvin Robinson was part of a split off from the Anglican Church. Is this before they thought to do that type of strategy? Or are they like the predecessors to this
They've
strategy?
been a thing for a while. I'm not sure how long, but they were a thing for a while, well before the Church of England did the same-sex blessings. I think it might have actually been over women's ordination. I think because the Church of England has had women bishops and priests for a while, and frankly, I think we should have split over that already. And that's something I briefly mentioned. There's some other issues with GAFCON and the ACNA, and that is one of them.
I thought the ACNA empowers the diocese to take care of this issue.
I think so, yes. And that's
either that or they don't do it at all. One or the other.
Because I think, even though I don't think a woman being ordained a pastor or a bishop is a damnable heresy or whatever, I think it is a dangerous, sinful error enough, both in terms of sin, but also even in terms of practical church life, that you just cannot have a meaningful ecclesial unity with disagreement over that. And so that's a big, big concern I have with GAFCON, how they're kind of tolerant on that. And so, and frankly, they are linked. They are linked. Women's ordination and homosexuality, they are justified by the same awful hermeneutical standards and zeitgeist. If you're going to have one, the other one has to follow, unless you have cognitive dissonance.
I mean, prove me wrong. Prove what you said wrong. Is there a single instance? Like, I was looking for, what was it? I was looking for in my book that I was writing. I was making the point that you were just making, that, you know, embracing feminism always leads to embracing the other stuff. And I was trying to find an exception. And it's like, oh, maybe there's certain Pentecostals that are really strong on this issue.
There are.
Jack Hibbs. Oh, Calvary Chapel only ordains men. Kerry Gordon, part of the Enemies Within the Church documentary. I don't know if you saw that, but he's charismatic. Does not ordain women. So, yeah, even the charismatics who don't ordain women are actually the ones that are, you know, awake on this issue. and on the other issues. Right. So I'm pretty sure. But the ones who do ordain women are your T.D. Jakes and your Joel Osteen types. So,
well, the interesting thing is that there is a real phenomena, and I know it because I literally grew up with it around me all my life. There is a real phenomena where charismatics and Pentecostals, they'll be all for women's ordination, but then like bark like a dog against same-sex marriage. That is a real phenomena. It's very fascinating.
Not in the United States.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Not in my.
It's a weird phenomena. It's real. It happens here. But I think it's only born out of like an ignorance of like consistent standards. And so I guess in some sense that's a grace. In some real sense that is a grace. But ultimately, if they're going to get conscious on this issue and actually try to apply consistent standards, it can only either go get rid of both same-sex marriage and women's ordination, or you embrace them both. You can't have
long term it's a failure. And I think the reason for that, or the reason that what you said could be true, or is true in places outside the United States, is because, Pentecostalism, as far as I can tell, that started in the United States with the so-called Third Great Awakening or whatever. So you had like Foursquare and a bunch of other denominations that
probably Second Great Awakening, I'd say, especially like that's where the roots were laid, like with Charles Finney and all that.
Correct, but there's a supposed event called the Third Great Awakening, which is where a lot of the returning the Restoration movement and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So, in America, they kind of went soft or weak on this issue and just focused on being mega churches or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in the other parts of the world, global South, they probably adhered more to tradition just because of, tradition. But I think they're eventually going to fail as they, because like you said, the hermeneutical standard isn't there. And my position on because I would call it heresy, the idea of women ordaining women, I would say that's heretical, but I have grace for people who come from traditions that embrace heresy. That is substantially different than being in a tradition that doesn't embrace a particular heresy and then going towards it. So Rick Warren, for example, him ordaining women is him coming out as a full-blown heretic because you didn't come from that tradition. And I understand that God can save people even though they are in a heretical faith tradition.
Yeah. And now there is an interesting third category. It's not big, so it's not like, oh, look, this disproves your correlation and causation thing. It doesn't disprove because it's not common, but it is a real phenomena of like high church, lowercase c Catholic communions or congregations, very liturgical, deny women's ordination, but approve same-sex marriage. That is a real thing. It's not common, but it is real, and it is baffling. It is baffling to say the least. Like, I think it's because they still maintain the high Romanist sense of the priesthood, where like there is an ontological sense of the priesthood, and it can only ontologically happen with men. Like, even if they do all the rituals and all the ordination ceremonies to a T in a proper canonical sense with a woman, she is just not objectively a priest. But somehow, same-sex marriage is okay. That is a real thing. It's very rare, and I think it's a real thing in England in some areas. But it's not very common, and it's extremely bizarre. It's really
weird. That is bizarre, and as Carolyn points out in the comments, it's enraging.
Yeah.
And then other Philip correctly points out, our church split when we denied same-sex marriage and left the PCUSA for even allowing a vote.
Mm-hmm.
But I was denied eldership because I denied female ordination. That is tragic.
Yeah,
that's a tragic end to what was a decent story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted a happy ending there. But no, not like Ravi Zacharias. That's why you're laughing, right? But ANCA, right? I'm just kidding. He's loosely ANCA. So anyway, I think we're about ready to do some meme review.
Heck yeah, I'm keen, man.
Okay, so this is courtesy of the people on the Twitter sphere. I'm going to refresh this page one more time to see what's new.
Oh, actually, sorry, really quickly, before you start that, there is another potential. It's not super likely, but it's in the realm of possibility. And the fact that it's in the realm of possibility is massive. A potential other party that could join that third category of denying women's ordination but approving same-sex blessings, portions of the Roman Catholic communion, potentially. Because you've probably heard of the event where there was this bishop synod in Germany, and they approved same-sex relationships, blessing them. You've heard of that?
Yes.
Now, so it's not marriage, and that's the interesting thing. Both the Church of England and the German bishops, they stopped short of blessing same-sex marriage because they still nonetheless recognize that the specific one man, one woman sacrament of marriage that can't be changed, but they decided to go the loophole way, bless same-sex relationships, which is functionally the same thing. So it's still heresy.
I mean, I would say that the Mormons might have already gone that way because they supported that marriage bill in the Congress. That was the gay marriage bill. So
but
they might already be there.
Anyway, this is something I pointed out on my Discord server to people. I noticed the dates. I checked the dates to make sure. So very closely how that happened. The Church of England approves blessing same-sex relationships. That was in mid-February or early February. And the German bishops did the same thing in early March. So very close to each other. Now, GAFCON in the Global South, one day later, February 9th to February 10th, they cut ties. Now, March 10th is when the German bishops announced they're going to bless same-sex relationships. And it is March 31st, still no response from the Vatican. Very interesting.
Now,
very, very interesting.
I want to say Pope Francis has contemplated the idea of female priests and bishops in very underserved areas in the church because of
I heard
the lack
somewhere he spoke against it
in South American context.
Okay. Well, I heard somewhere that he has actually quite strongly spoke against that, and even same-sex marriage itself. But the fact that the Vatican has not responded yet, and even I just checked now just to see if there was any response.
You have a magisterium and you're not using it.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the hilarious thing. Just today, the Vatican's Dicastery for Divine Worship, basically regulating liturgy, they responded today to the German bishops who wanted to specifically on the issue of allowing. I want to say commissioning of lay for the qualification and commissioning of laymen and laywomen to lead the celebration of baptism. They responded on that, and I think one other issue, and they said no. But they still haven't responded on the same-sex blessings thing. That is interesting. Maybe, to be charitable, maybe they think no response is needed, and I'd still say that's like ridiculously imprudential because of the idea of the automatic excommunication. I think this is one of those issues that to approve that, it'll be an automatic excommunication. But practically, that still needs to be enforced. So the fact that they haven't even they responded on that, denying the German bishops who want to let laymen and laywomen lead those celebrations, but not on same-sex blessings. That is very interesting.
Hey,
very interesting.
That will stop a lot of trads from going Catholic if the Catholic Church embraces it.
Oh, I think that's
and we'll welcome them.
If the Catholic Church, that's another thing. If the Catholic Church writ large allowed same-sex blessings, there would be a mass exodus. There will be. There was the one case of Steve Skojec.
You even saw that with the UMC. If people are leaving the UMC after it already embraced homosexuality in like the 70s, but now it's just so in your face that people are finally awake to it.
Yeah. And if that was to happen, and again, I still think it's more unlikely than not that the Vatican will openly allow same-sex blessings. But the mere fact that it's to this point tolerating it in a sense, even though they did warn the German bishops before they did that they can't do it. They did warn them.
I'm going to count to 3.
But there's still no response after it seems at the moment that the German bishops called the Vatican's bluff. So there's still no response. Maybe they're preparing something. I don't know. But like 3 weeks later, when the GAFCON in the Global South just instant, done, that's it. I don't know. Maybe they're preparing something. But if that was to happen, again, not likely, but if that was to happen of the Vatican officially allowing for same-sex blessings worldwide, there'd be a mass exodus of faithful Catholics and especially of trads.
I hope that's the case. I think
I hope
it'll
so
only
too,
be the
but
case for trads, but people defend the Catholic Church despite when it completely goes against the Bible and Christian tradition. It's like,
yeah, they
where yet might they be struck?
Some of
You
them
already tolerate Mariolatry and
that's it,
Immaculate
and
Conception.
that's it. And here's the thing: some Romanists, some very well-learned Romanists, they have a very, very sophisticated epistemological system where they take the church as like a necessary epistemological precondition for like knowing what biblical teaching is. And so some of them, it's going to be very interesting. If something like this happens, it'll be interesting to see whether for some of them, this may be a breaking point where they see, okay, I'm probably wrong on this issue, or somehow more bizarrely, they double down and say, well, look, the church says same-sex blessings are okay. I may feel strongly against that, but I just have to submit. That'll be interesting, but absolute certain, many trads will leave if that was to happen. And the unfortunate thing is that they have been spoon-fed a lot of really bad epistemological arguments from like Catholic Answers and other Romanist apologists to such a point where many of them will straight up apostatize, not go to Orthodoxy. I think many will go to Orthodoxy, not go to another Protestant denomination, full on apostatize. Just like Steve Skojec, he was a famous apostate case of a trad cath gone full on unbeliever, precisely because he was raised up on these promises like certainty in the papacy and all that. And for him, that was ruined with Pope Francis. And now he's a full on unbeliever. Wow. So that's the scary thing about this, that there'll be people who just leave the entire faith writ large because of that kind of action.
That will be interesting to watch. And many Protestants out there are like, well, they're the whore of Babylon anyway. So
exactly. And who knows? Again, that's unlikely that the Vatican writ large will do that. But the fact that they're still not responding, and if that kind of no response form of negative tolerance continues, that could start to get a lot of trads asking questions, like very serious questions.
Very serious. Yeah, questions that they probably should have started asking, but yes. All right, meme review. I'm going to try and blow this. So I guess this is our first meme of the day. You're judging me. I read you a Bible verse. It's the woman and the cat meme.
Yeah.
For those listening, because I'll turn this into an audio podcast. I like it. You know, it's a solid 7.
Yeah. For me, context, when I do the 0 to 10 scale, 5 for me doesn't mean bad. It just means average. Average. So I'm going to say 5 for this.
Okay. Yeah, 6. Let's go 6. That comes from Nancy17. And we got based Poland in the house with the, there's the misconception that Old Testament Judaism is the same as modern day Judaism. And it has like a flow chart of the misconceptions is that Christians and the New Testament split off from Judaism. But the reality is that Old Testament Judaism led to New Testament, accept Jesus, Christianity, and then reject Jesus had a different flow chart to the Second Temple being destroyed as prophesied in multiple occasions in Scripture, leading to Talmudic Judaism and the 6-pointed star as a symbol for Judaism, which, historically speaking, occurred after the fall of Jerusalem. Historic. Yeah. I always thought it was dubious that a 6-pointed star would be a symbol for believers in God.
Yep.
I'll do that video one day and see how I get treated like Kanye West and Stripe cancels my payment processing account and my bank account gets canceled for pointing out that, God's believers wouldn't use a 6-pointed star at any point, specifically David, who they credit it with. But I give this a 10 out of 10 just for being a very concise deconstruction of very bad theology, and that comes from based Poland.
I give it a solid 8 because it's very based and true, and it exposes a ubiquitous error because it's not true. If you're a Christian, you claim to be Christian, you claim that Christian faith is a true faith. You are by necessity claiming that it was the religion of the Old Testament prophets, even if it was in an older covenant, but it's still the same true religion. And you must by necessity deny that modern Judaism is in continuity with that they are an aberration. I like to say that myself. I like to say that Judaism today is a post-Second Temple heresy. It's not the Old Testament religion. It's not. It's totally different religion. I only say 8 just because there's a bit more text than should be in a good meme, but otherwise solid 8 for the content.
Right. So I'm not familiar with Base Poland. I believe I've actually met Base Poland in real life. So true story. Let's see. Oh wait, this meme comes from Unconscionable. This is the Shiba Inu buff versus not buff meme. Now there's a viral video of a pit bull just going after one of these dogs, or viral video, not a meme, but which, you know, it was clearly the Shiba Inu on the right, not the left, that the pit bull was just gnawing on. So Priest 1450 buffed Shiba Inu. I burnt 15 sodomites at the stake. And then Priest 2020, love is love.
Now, I must say, I'm in full support of banning and putting down all pit bulls. Amen. Amen. Pit bulls need to be eradicated. There's no reason to have them as a pet. Yeah.
See, I believe in going Old Testament. And if you put a beware of dog sign in your yard, you've already established that your dog has a violent reputation. And therefore, if it attacks someone, it dies. It gets put down.
There is that.
And then you get put down.
There's the issue with the fact that pit bulls are uniquely made for that, and many pit bull owners, because they treat them as pets, they take them out in public, like take them out for walks or even let them around their kids. And so I genuinely think that pit bulls should just be straight up.
I think the biblical solution is it actually solves the argument, because if it's the owners, then the owner can get put down too.
I agree with that.
And then that will create a deterrent for bad owners, or that'll create a deterrent for the dog. If you apply the biblical principle of, if you have a dog that's known to be violent and it kills someone, then you get that punishment as well.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
You committed negligent homicide. I think that'll solve the issue.
I think do both. I think establish a government fatwa against all pit bulls, but then if you're found in possession of a pit bull and if it kills someone, put you down as well. I 100% agree with that. But yeah, this meme, solid 9 out of 10. Solid 9 out of 10 for this meme.
Yeah, there's a particularly gruesome case in like Texas or something that this happened. This one, I believe this is a Christian Mario meme. The rational view is a dude wielding a hammer on a nail, and the atheist view is the hammer what's the ex nihilo or whatever, hitting the nail, like out of nothing. The hammer is hitting the nail, nothing's holding the hammer, nothing's behind the hammer, it's just in midair hitting the nail.
Straight to the point. It's just straight to the point. Solid 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think it's an 8. Yes, love it. I didn't rate the last one, I just remembered. And then this one I just submitted. Okay, you're Australian, so I wasn't sure if you'd get this. I wasn't sure if you'd get this, but recently we had a tragedy here in Nashville where a self-proclaimed transvestite attacked and murdered 6 people at a Christian school, 3 adults, 3 young children. And we have a fork in the road meme. And on the left is one of the officers that gunned down this person, this woman, the rare female mass shooter. And on the right, we have, towards the dark side, is Megan Hall, who I didn't realize was from Tennessee. I thought she was from Kentucky or whatever, which I get those states confused, those 2 states, even though I could name them on a map. But yeah, the light side is this cop that gunned down the female school shooter, and the dark side is Megan Hall, the cop that serviced an entire police department, sexually speaking, and avoids all accountability for it. That's the funny, like, if you've seen her do interviews, she's like, I said no. And it's kind of like that Bill Burr comedy bit where it's like, you just got a bad read on the transcript with, with the words no, stop, it can sound any way you want them to. So that meme I saw earlier today. I think that was the last meme I submitted to this. And I found this meme. I shared it with my wife and my family, sent in the group chat. So this meme is a solid 9 out of 10 for me.
This is a 10 out of 10. Oh, this came out of left field. This is 10 out of 10 for me.
And it's vague. And I asked for Christian memes, but I vaguely am circumventing this as Christian because of the attack on Christians earlier this week. So I'm using that as the loose context for calling this a Christian meme. But yes, which way, man. Police? And this is a Christian Mario meme that I submitted here. And it's the handshake, it's an artistic rendition of the famous handshake from Predator between Carl Weathers and Sylvester Stallone. Arnold Schwarzenegger. My bad. I meant no disrespect. And it's white women in 2020 and Muslims shaking hands over liking black squares.
Oh man.
And they don't realize, I guess the first 2 commandments and the 10 commandments don't apply in Islam because the black square, completely violates that because it predates Islam as far as I can remember. And
oh my word!
But this meme I think is another 9 out of 10.
This one's a definite 9.5 at least for me.
I'm feeling it. This is a meme that I submitted. I tweeted this out from the Evangelical dark web account. It's if you've ever seen Tom and Jerry, it's Tom sticking the double-barreled shotgun through the mouse hole and not realizing that the barrel of the gun has curved around to point him in the head. And Tom in this meme is Ben Shapiro. He's pointing the gun in the mouse hole that says facts don't care about your feelings. And the gun's about to hit him in the head saying Jesus is the Messiah. And I absolutely love this meme because it's so...
These last 3 have been bangers. 9.5, solid 9.
That's another 9. I love it. I got a lot of Twitter love for this one when I sent it out. We got more replies. I didn't like that one. It's not worthy. No. This one I feel like is a troll meme, but it's a political cartoon.
That looks like a wartime political thing.
I'm not really gonna read that. That doesn't qualify. You didn't send me your best. Okay, we got some best maybe here. Hey man, Jesus gave us like one commandment, bro. This is like a hippie, I guess, hippie Christian, bro. Which is to be vaguely nice to each other, man. And just read this like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. As long as you're being vaguely nice by the cultural standards of the current time period in which we live in and completely ignoring the Bible, you're doing a heckin' wholesome Christianity. I'm going to give this one a 2. I'm not feeling it.
Hey, like, Zoink Scoop, we need to just be nice, man.
Maybe it's my reading of it that just didn't do it, credit.
You've surely seen this one before. This is an old one. It's a goodie.
I've never seen this one actually.
Oh, okay. Well, it's an old one. And it's good and it's super true. So I give it like a solid 7.
Maybe it just needs fewer words.
These kinds of memes, maybe not particularly this one, but these kinds of memes where they like do like a crappy drawing of someone and like do like a caricature of what they say. These ones do benefit from more words. You just got to craft them well. So This one's like average crafting. So I'd say solid 7 out of 10 for me.
All right, we got okay. Yeah, you get the Soy Jack saying pedophilia is a sexuality, and then the Chad bashing his head in with a bat. It's a
bit too blunt.
Yeah, a baseball bat's a blunt force object.
I mean, it's a blunt force instrument, but
today's opening day for baseball, by the way.
This one's more like a rallying cry than a meme. I'd say
I'm gonna give it a 4 because they posted this on opening day for baseball. Otherwise, it would get like a 3. So you got an extra boost for timing. So this one's a side by side of 2 articles. One by Tonic. I've never heard of that outlet. Why has rectal cancer quadrupled in millennials? And then another article that says millennials are the gayest generation in America. This is a bit of a life comes at you fast meme.
Yep.
Anal sex is not good for you, by the way.
It's not. No. 7 out of 10. Good 7 out of 10.
Yeah. I'll give it a 6. Then my favorite part of history of gay history is Sodom and Gomorrah, and this is a painting rendition. It looks like Lot's wife has already been turned into a pillar of salt, but down there in the painting, but it's the family leaving with Abraham. I'm gonna give this an 8.
7.5.
Actually, I'm gonna deduct points for using the acronym, so it's gonna get a 7. I don't like the acronym. I think that's you betray our convictions when you use that. In my opinion,
my favorite part of abominable history.
I would just say gay history. I think that's sufficient, but you don't speak about sins and acronyms. I just think that completely pacifies the language. That's from Hirisco. I'm not good at pronunciation, so we got a couple more memes. Grow your own food, homeschool your kids, arm yourself and train others, support local small business.
I give it a 0 because it's not even a meme. It's just true. It's 100% true. It's not even a meme. So I can't.
Laws. Yeah, it's a 2 from me. It's not really a meme. And they didn't screenshot it properly. You gotta send me your best. Actually, I'll give it a 1 for that. You're not sending me your best. Okay, we got a meme about Klaus Schwab, and it says you will own nothing and be happy. And we got a soy jock asking, not even my Funko Pops. And Klaus Schwab replies, no. And then you got the soy radicalism. He's got the Thanos gauntlet and the red eyes, laser eyes, and he has a mask of a skeleton jawline on his head, like he's Ghost from Call of Duty. This one's a 5. I'm liking it. I like the Funko Pops. Not even my Funko Pops, because that's going to drive him to radicalism. Yeah, let's bump it up to a 6.
Solid 7.5 for me.
And then let children. This is the button dilemma, and it's let children die of heart attacks versus admit I was lied to.
Yep.
And this is aimed at you, Donald Trump. You get a 3 out of 10. And part of that's for not cropping the screenshot.
I'll give it a 4. Yeah. And it'd be 5, but the cropping, yeah.
You got to crop that. You got to send me your best. Don't be like Mexico and America's border. Okay. You got to send me your best. As Donald Trump would say. RIP, because he got indicted today, supposedly.
Yeah.
All right. We got a lengthy meme. Yo, dog, you actually believe international bankers are involved in a global conspiracy to create a one world government? And then it's a quote that is exactly that I don't feel like reading. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 10.
Basically a banker admitting to that. Too much text. I'll give that like a 3.
Too much text and I was winded. It does appear to be our memes.
I've got one I want to share that my friend just sent me today. Oh man, it summarizes the issue beautifully. You ready?
Hold on. Alrighty.
Did you hear what Audrey Hale did? She, and then interrupted, he, right, thanks. He murdered 6 people.
I don't know. I feel like this is a liberals meme.
No, it's not. No, it's like, that's the funny thing. It's like before he even says what he did, the person corrects the gender, and it's like, oh, sorry, yes, we're gonna make sure we get the gender right. Anyway, he murdered 6 people. That's
you
that's
dead named him though. His name is Aiden.
This one was a good 8 out of 10 because it just beautifully shows the pathetic priorities of these people. They're basically enemies at this point.
Oh yeah, always have been meme.
You mean we're not one nation, indivisible? always have been.
Never
Always
has been, or something. I don't know.
Well, since like, I don't know, mid-century, maybe mid-20th century. I don't know.
Yeah, the more you look back on American history, it's like, yeah, the Civil War wasn't good to have a Civil War, but I think that the point of no return was that Woodrow Wilson era and the progressive amendments. They just completely, screwed America up.
Mm.
You got the 16th through 19th amendments, which were all bad. And like some of them were Karen amendments, like the prohibition on alcohol was driven by Karens. We gave the Karens power and they screwed up the entire 1920s and allowed the rise of organized crime. My Italian heritage and the mafia at work there. But at least we got Sopranos out of it and Godfather and Goodfellas, The Departed.
Seeing a pattern with your favorite director here.
I named Scorsese and Scorsese is both Departed. Actually, I actually think Goodfellas is not even close to being as good as Departed, but that's just me.
Really?
Yeah.
That'll get you bashed in some places, huh?
I know. I just love the fact that they have 4 A-list actors, in The Departed, and they all do a great job. And something about Goodfellas just goes on a little too long. I don't know.
I think I love The Departed because all the memes about how, because it's all like, I think it's like what, Southie, South Boston, and it's all there. So everyone just like to say, "Oh, it's The Departed." Hey, it's The Departed.
Yeah, it's weird. What's funny about The Departed is I think it's based off a South Korean screenplay.
Is it?
Yeah,
that's funny.
I think it won Best Adapted Screenplay, and I believe it was adapted from a South Korean screenplay.
Wow, I want to see the original now. That's hilarious. From South Korea to South Boston. How funny.
Yeah, but in terms of organized crime, but yeah,
I want to
been watching a lot of Sopranos lately, so you've heard me.
I just started on that. I've never seen it. I've just started.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it either, so I made a reference to Sopranos in a recent video of mine, and no one's gotten mad at me for it. Usually, when I make a Seinfeld reference, people like it.
I just love. I don't know why, but for some reason, American movies based in South Boston, they always hit the spot. I don't know if it's the accent. It's like, hey, I'm from Southie, and then like, and The Departed and all that. I don't know.
How many other movies are in South Boston?
Yeah, like The Departed. Is that in South Boston or is that somewhere else? I think that's in Boston.
It's either in Boston or Providence, but I think they make reference to a trip to Providence, so I'm pretty sure it's South Boston.
So there's The Departed, there's Black Mass, and The Town. I love all those movies. They're very good.
Okay, and there's Boondock Saints? That's in Boston, right?
Haven't seen that one.
Okay, it's a cult classic. Emphasis on the cult part.
Okay.
If you're Catholic, you ought to love that movie because the Irish Catholic. But John Patrick Flannery is going to be in an upcoming Christian movie called Nefarious. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No.
Oh. So that's going to be a Christian film with Sean Patrick Flannery, and it's got mainstream appeal. So I'm going to be very interested to see how that goes. And then if you make reference to Game of Thrones or something like that, people pretend not to even get your references or whatever. So it's pretty funny. But I do have an article / video that I'll do on one of the actors from Game of Thrones who deconstructed their faith. So
shock. Wow, shock and horror. You mean an actor in a movie that's like all about like what, rape, gore, and death and betrayal? Wow, shock and horror. That's sad, but I mean,
it is sad, but it's not what you just said necessarily. I think Game of Thrones actually became more about girl boss power, and that's why
it definitely did do that. Yeah, it did eventually go that way. But
that's why it sucked at the end, because they went girl boss.
Like, look, honestly, a bit after watching it all, I ended up like thinking back and like I genuinely feel dirty for watching that show just because of how much of that crap is in it. Like it is like the whole theme of it. And from what I've heard, that's basically what the books are about, and the show.
I've read the books.
It's all like tons of emphasis on like, oh, look at all this rape and all this gore, and like there's no meaning, and the good people get corrupted or die.
What's weird is that they created the show created sex scenes that weren't in the book, and
so they actually went out of their way to do that.
Yes.
Wow.
Like Sansa does not marry Ramsay Snow. Like that's a really stupid plot line. But actually, I think the show went wrong in season 4, episode 10, the season finale, arguably their best season. But there's a thing in television where you can do all your, shoot your wad, so to speak, and you didn't set yourself up for future plot lines well.
Yeah.
They changed why, Tyrion killed Tywin. They completely changed the reason, which didn't set the character up to succeed in the future plot lines because he had nothing to do for the rest of the series. And part of why is because they changed the reason. They the Clegane, Brienne of Tarth fighting Sandor Clegane doesn't happen in the books. And even if it did, Brienne of Tarth would, lose.
That's what I hear about.
And then one last thing
from a lot of people
is that the show implied that Robin Arryn was Peter Baelish's son. That is not true. They were quoting dialogue directly from the book, but they removed the context for that dialogue because the context for that dialogue was an ongoing mystery that the reader was learning about through various perspective sources, not a singular plot line.
Right.
That context was that Lysa Arryn was forced to abort her child that she had with Peter Baelish by her father, who then married her off to her husband that was older than her dad.
That's what I heard from a lot of people, that after season 4 is where it started to go down. That's what I hear from a lot of people.
But I would say that the starting point was the season 4 finale.
Okay.
And then in season 5, they went girl boss with weak men aren't able to rule Dorne. And then they gave Arya Stark a sex scene for some reason, even though her character was not older than 14 years old, being generous with time. Yeah. It's like, you're really pulling the whole 1 season equals 1 year nonsense.
Yeah. And the,
like that's not like season 2 takes place over 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, there you go. I know at some point, I know that was definitely the case with like seasons 7 and 8. Like they didn't have the new books. When did it start that they started to produce new series, but the books were not yet done? Do you know when that started?
Season 5, even though season 4 completed book 3. So they had 2 more books to work with, but they went straight to book 6, theoretically, that hasn't come out yet.
So that's why it
started. And then in season 6, they went through book 4. After going through book 5, which book 4 and book 5 are parallel to each other, but then they connect. At the end of book 5 is where it moves the plot forward. But
so that would explain why it started to go downhill with season 5, because they basically were running out of material.
They didn't run out of material. They ignored the material that they did.
Okay, yeah.
They deliberately ignored the material. Like Jaime Lannister goes to the Riverlands, he doesn't go to Dorne. They ignored the material. Tyrion, and they meet the fake Aegon in the East, who is allegedly Daenerys' older brother, cousin, or nephew.
You never know the Targaryens.
Nephew.
Right.
Who was supposedly killed. No, not both, but old enough to be, with the Targaryen tradition, old enough to fulfill the Targaryen tradition. But yeah, so it's weird. So the show went feminist, and then one of the other issues with it, they made Tyrion Lannister take all the blame for Daenerys' incompetence. Like Daenerys is extremely incompetent in the books.
Mm-hmm.
She does not know how to rule.
Right.
And they in the show they had Tyrion take all the blame for that, which,
of course, it wasn't the girl
this
boss,
is something that writers called foreshadow. Right? Her being incompetent in the books was foreshadow for her being a villain.
Mm-hmm.
When you remove the foreshadow and stick with the conclusion, It doesn't seem right. And people got very upset for no reason. Or they got upset for that reason, but I think a lot of people wanted a happy ending. And, so they're wrong there. And they're also wrong for not seeing that all these issues were present in season 7, which was also terrible. There's only, 2 seasons I've never rewatched, and those are the 2 seasons I've never.
Honestly,
7 and 8. But
for me, when I watched it, because I didn't care, because I know that I understood that there were these issues of like plots and poor plot structures and all that stuff. But it was, for me, when I was watching it, I didn't care about that stuff. It was just an interesting show and it was fun. And there was like enough of general continuity that it was fun and decent for me, even all the way up to season 7. Although there were points where I was just like, oh, it sucks. This is boring, blah, blah, blah. And for me, because of that, I didn't have that as much of like a critical stake in it. And so I was hyped for season 8. I was expecting something like a massive war with the.
I knew season. I was dreading season 8 because I knew it would be bad. And then the first episode was somewhat decent, and then the second episode was terrible.
Yeah,
like that was the worst episode I'd ever seen.
Again, I didn't have.
And then the third episode was the one where everyone hated.
Yeah, I didn't have this massive stake in it, and so I was just at least expecting. I don't care as long as they're like a massive drawn out war with this undead invasion, and they go all the way into Westeros, and there's like struggles, lots of battles, losses, lots of people die, and then eventually there's a climactic victory at some point. I don't know, and then maybe like after that, there's a final war between like the remaining humans or whatever. I was still going to be hyped for that. I was going to be epic, only to see what was it? Was it episode 2 where they were defeated?
Episode 2 was the episode where nothing happened.
I think it was episode 3 where the invasion was stopped because the main guy was killed. Like when I saw
and here's a fun fact: the show invented that character. The Night King was an invention of the show. It's not in the books.
Really? So was there no like head of the undead invasion or?
Correct. There's no established head. Like they're called the Others in the books, but for all we know, they're just individualistic zombies. They're not, and they command these little skull things called wights, which are like the skulls. The Others, do more damage to you permanently.
Right.
And then the wights are, just undead bodies like you see in Skyrim.
Right. Yeah. The Draugr.
So
I was hyped, but then I still remember I was watching it. And when I saw just Arya Stark just appear from the shadow and stab him, or like he grabs her and she drops a knife and stabs him in the stomach and he just dies. I'm just like, is that it? No, that can't be it. And then just over a few minutes, it dawns on me, oh my word, it's over in the first battle. What? This threat built up from the first scene in
every character
of the first season, and it's over in the first engagement. What?
And then all the characters survived.
And all the popular characters survived. What the heck?
I just hate it. Like, there's so many things I hate about that episode. You give someone who's never fought in a battle command. Like, Brianna Tarth has never fought in a battle, but she was given command over, like, one of the flanks. It's like, why? She's a lowborn, or not lowborn. She was highborn knight, but, like, no battles ever fought.
Don't get me started. I mean, like, look, I think some people, to preface this, I think some people are too, like, when some people see shows with battle, like fantasy shows or fictional shows with battles and all that, and they see a commander make like a really bad tactical decision, they like to say, "Oh, that's such like a bad plot point." It's like, no, that stuff happens in real life. Like bad tactical decisions happen in real life. So
it's very rare.
I'm not quick to ascribe bad plot writing to bad tactical decisions. That can happen. But even then, was that in the books? Like the Dothraki head-on charge? Was that in the books or not?
No, they haven't gone.
No, sorry, it wasn't even written. What am I saying? It's not even written yet. So that was a show decision. So when they decided that, even for me, I was like, "Are you guys serious?
They're light infantry, or they're light cavalry.
You literally sent your light cavalrymen. Oh, they had flaming swords. What do you freaking do? You sent them head on into a wall of darkness. Like even us people watching the show, that was another criticism of it. Like, it was
they survived. Don't you remember they survived that?
Oh yeah. Oh no. You're thinking of the some
in
of
the
them
next
did.
episodes they were back.
I remember that being an issue with the Unsullied. That's it. Like you could see in that battle, like the Unsullied they were holding the wall, but they were just getting like down by the droves, by line after line, just dropping. Suddenly, you see after King's Landing is taken, and you see like these big legions of Unsullied. Like, I'm sorry, where's the spawn point for new Unsullied? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So a lot of issues, and bells have never been known to surrender.
Anyway,
which is a line from the show.
Anglicanism.
But you know what show actually pulled off the same thing as Game of Thrones, but much better?
What?
Babylon 5. It had an existential plot line and then a political plot line.
Okay.
In their 4th season, they concluded both excellently.
Okay.
So I recommend checking that out. It's 90s sci-fi, but I'd say Babylon 5 is better than Star Trek The Next Generation. That's a hot take, probably.
That's a very hot take, yeah.
I think the Star Trek The Next Generation is actually overrated. They have too many bad, horrendous episodes to be considered a great show. They have great moments, but as a show, you had a clip episode in the 2nd season, which the 1st season was already kind of rough, and then the 7th season is so awful until the finale, which is actually really good. So they have way too many bad episodes to consider it a great series. And the Dothraki, or not Dothraki, the Klingon Civil War in Next Generation was a huge disappointment for me. So but Babylon 5 does a lot of the same. I think does a lot of it better. Does a lot of science fiction better. And it does. Anyway. It was an influencer on Game of Thrones, probably.
Want to talk about Anglicanism again? Like conclude it?
I think we're ready to conclude. We had our diversions. Now, I think I checked out your. I did check out your stream on like what was it? Crusader Kings 3.
Oh yeah.
Because I was interested in getting that game, and then I saw you talking about it, like, huh.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Let me check this out. But
it's fun.
You're trying to make the Eastern Romans great again.
My personal editor, I've got a guy who's volunteered in services as like an editor because I can do it myself, but it's just too much time. So he does a lot of highlight edits for me, and I'm about to check it now, but he's just finished a highlights edit for that stream, and so I'm going to put that up on my gaming YouTube channel. So it's going to be good. I'm expecting, because he does a good job, very good job.
All right,
and that's the first episode. I need to schedule actually the 2nd episode of that series. Today's Friday. I could possibly even do it. Maybe not tomorrow. I'm not sure. Probably not. Actually, no, I possibly could if I want. But yeah, the aim of that series, establish the supremacy of Pastor Jim's Bible Church over medieval Europe. Absolutely. Let's get it happening. And Stephen Anderson, as you've probably seen, Stephen Anderson has already conquered Rome and taken the papal tiara. Yes. So it's happening.
It's happening. So I want to let you know, Evangelical Dark Web is a Christian news gathering and commentary mystery. You can support it by liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you're new. That's the least you can do. Bare minimum. But the most you can do is we have a Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org. And you get extra benefits, more content. I just added a lawsuit tracker because there's a lot of lawsuits I've been covering. So I'm trying to create a central hub to like, okay, what's the latest on this lawsuit, that lawsuit, that lawsuit? So far I got 3. Alabama looks like they're trying to scam you when it comes to getting information on court cases. Like it's like $9 for a pop, like each time you search or whatever. And it's like, well, how do I just get a lifetime for tracking a case? I don't know, but it's like they seem, there's a certain stereotype about lawyers being from a certain ethnic group, and Alabama is proving that to be the case.
So wait, who do you have to pay just to be able to track lawsuits? Like
Alabama, their individual court, their circuit court to get the court documents, but it's like super illogical. It's like
in Australia, we have a term for that. It's called revenue raising. When it's particularly for like when they add fines or charges for like fines for like the most stupid things, and it's clearly just revenue raising. That's all they're doing.
Yeah, I actually like this. This is one thing the state of Maryland gets right, is that you can go on Maryland Judiciary Case Search. You can look that up and you can search any name, a case number, and it tells you, and it's free.
Yeah.
But all these other states, they're very cryptic about it. They're very cryptic about public records like crime and background checks.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And then, and it's just super expensive. But I'm going to try and, put some effort into that. And we got more stuff, more content behind the paywall. But otherwise, the newsletter, also completely free, and you get the news in your inbox. Plug your stuff.
100%. Yep. The Other Paul. I am actually soon considering a brand name change. I'm going to keep the Other Paul persona, obviously. So you'll still see that in streams and other things. But otherwise, for my overall brand, I'm intending to change it to something a bit more like third person objective, like professional. Because I do want this to be like a good, respectable like brand and ministry in that. So that'll be happening sometime. I pride myself on being very good with coming
Anglican
up with
dark web.
Honestly, yeah, that'd be something. That could be something. But I'm normally very good at coming up with good names for things, and I literally made the Other Paul, and it's so good. It's literally become like a trend. You see the Other Philip here, but you even got a ton of others you can find, like the Other James, the Other Caleb. On my server, just randomly a bunch of people adopted, like the Other Aaron, the Other Daniel, and just random stuff everywhere. But yeah, it's actually hard for me to come up with names, so I'm still trying to think of it. But yeah, that'll be happening. But otherwise, you can still find me, The Other Paul, on YouTube. You can find my website, theotherpaul64.com. And importantly, you can also support me on Subscribestar. So you can just find me there, search The Other Paul, you'll find me. Get really cool benefits for different tiers of support. And yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Alrighty. Otherwise, have a blessed night, and we will catch you on the next one.